In this second video for section 1A, entitled Living in the Media Age, we're going to look at 5 more types of fallacies in arguments. Remember that arguments are are supposed to be reasoned or thoughtful processes. An argument is not two people yelling at each other to try to convince one or the other, or shout down the other person and convince them that they're right. An argument of that type may contain some reasonable process, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about analyzing a claim being made to see if that claim can, with validity, be made from the premises. So we are identifying the premises in the argument, identifying the conclusion, and determining whether that conclusion can be drawn or not. And in these 5 remaining examples, we are saying the conclusion cannot be definitively made because there is a fallacy, an error in the reasoning. So the 5th type of fallacy we look at is called the limited choice. The structure of the limited choice is this. So we are told that a certain premise does not hold, and we are told that the claim of conclusion, only conclusion Q, is the only claim that we can make. Let's see this in action. So you hear arguments, fallacious arguments of this type being made all the time on talk radio, in political ads, more often than in advertisement for a product. It goes something like this: you don't support the president, therefore you are not patriotic. The conclusion being made is put forth as the only valid conclusion from the premise. You don't support the premise, or premise B doesn't hold. Obviously there are other possibilities besides the one being made, so we should be aware that this is a fallacy, and a commonly used one too. The structure of the appeal to emotion fallacy goes like this. The conclusion P is associated with a positive emotional response. That's enough to make the claim that P is true. That's a fallacy. P would not be true just because it is associated with the positive emotional response. Let's see this in action. So you see a picture of a baby, and then you hear the voiceover and see on the screen, because so much is riding on your tires. The argument goes, because you love your baby, make sure you buy this brand of tires. Now, this the claim being made is that because you love your baby, you should buy this brand of tires. We're not doing a more in-depth analysis. Is this brand of tires actually safer for you and your baby? And so, we're saying that you should look more deeply than to accepting the emotional response. These are actually often very powerful ads. You can see them in selling beer and tires and all kinds of things. You can evoke a very powerful emotional response and associate it with that product, and they can be very effective. And however, the underlying argument being made, this product is better because of this, is obviously not valid. And this doesn't just happen in advertising to get you to buy a product. It happens in political ads, certain kinds of music associated with a candidate or a presidential candidate, certain scenes that you will see associated with a candidate to associate you with powerful, positive emotions in that candidate. And the purpose is just to be aware that you're having that emotional response, and not associate the person or the product, or not purchase the product or vote for that person just because of that. Like all the fallacies, here's another one that is very effective. We should be aware of the fact that the fallacies are used all the time. The manipulations in them are very effective, and we need to be aware of them so that we can think more clearly. So, the general structure of the personal attack is I have or you have a problem with person or group X making a certain kind of claim, therefore that claim must be false. Let's see this in action. So you're talking with someone and they say to you, you should stop drinking because it is hurting your grades, it's endangering people when you drive, and it's damaging your relationships. And you say, well, I've seen you drink too much on occasion. So what's going on here? Let's analyze this argument. The person talking to you is giving the conclusion, you should stop drinking. And you're saying, no, that conclusion is invalid because you drink sometimes too much. Now, it may be that you drink sometimes too much, but that doesn't mean that the conclusion, you should stop drinking for these reasons, is invalid. And you find the personal attack happening in interpersonal arguments often, just such as this, and you find it happening, you can see it right now in the political ads and the candidates running for president. Don't believe so-and-so because he does this, or so-and-so would not make a good president because he does this or she does this, and we have to disassociate the personal attack from the claim being made and see clearly that this is a fallacy that is trying to throw us off track. The straw man fallacy is named such because it used to be the case many years ago that straw men were actually burned, and the straw men were associated with that is not real men, but men made out of straw were burned, and we were burning off the evil enemy or something like that to rally the people to go to battle or something like that. So let's look at the general structure of the straw man argument. We find the straw man type of argument used all the time in political persuasion. Its basic structure is I have a problem, an argument, perhaps a valid argument, against a distorted version of P, of conclusion P, therefore conclusion P is false. What would that look like in action? Something like this. So you see an ad talking about a mayor who wants to decriminalize use of a certain drug. A political opponent comes on and says, well, the mayor doesn't believe drug use is wrong, I do. So why is this a fallacy? Why is this the straw man fallacy? The mayor did not make the claim that they want to decriminalize all drugs, or that they don't believe drug use is wrong. They are only making or they're only wanting to decriminalize a certain drug. So in this type of argument, the claim being made of someone else is false. It's stretched quite a bit, typically. So-and-so is associated with something that we all agree would be incorrect when they are not ever making the claim being said. They are making much less of a claim. You find this is actually fairly effective in political argument, because a lot of people will believe the worst about the candidates running, and they will believe that a candidate said something more than what they have said when the straw man argument is used. So we have to be aware. This is another type of fallacy that we have to be aware of. In this example of a fallacious argument, you actually find this happening just like all the other fallacies, fairly common. A student says to their professor, you can't give me a C, I'm an A student. So why is this fallacious? Well, and why is it circular reasoning? let's look at the structure of circular reasoning fallacy, the circular reasoning fallacy first. So circular reasoning looks essentially like this. P is true because P is true, or it's a little more subtle than that. P is true because some slight variant of P is true. So in this particular argument we're looking at, you can't give me a C because I'm an A student. In other words, you can't give me... this one's actually a somewhat subtle version of circular reasoning. It's essentially saying you can't give me a C because I'm not a C student. The proof that I'm not a C student is I've gotten A's in other classes. But the fact that you've gotten A's in other classes isn't relevant. You're essentially saying you can't give me a C because you can't give me a C. A little more direct version of it would be this. He is a good speaker because he speaks so well. Well, you're trying to prove that he is a good speaker, and then you said he speaks so well, but both of them are information that you're providing. You're essentially saying he is a good speaker because he is a good speaker. Back to the first one, you can't give me a C. You're essentially saying you can't give me a C because I can't, because you can't give me a C. The fact that you've made A's in other classes is not relevant in this case. So the red herring argument is to draw a metaphor for drawing someone off track with an argument. It's essentially saying P is valid because Q, which is related to P in some way, maybe only loosely, is valid. The red herring would be, the metaphor is that the scent of the herring would draw dogs looking for something off the track because they go for the scent of the herring. So an example of a red herring argument would go something like this. I can't believe that cop gave me a speeding ticket. He should have been focused on catching real lawbreakers like robbers or murderers. Well, the argument is the policeman should not have given me a speeding ticket. The support for that was that something that we would believe in, but it's not the same thing. He should have been off or focused on catching real lawbreakers like robbers or murderers. Yes, police should be focused on that, but that doesn't mean that the fact that you were speeding should have been overlooked. So the red herring is something that we use in our personal day-to-day life, but you find it often used in political ads. Someone's trying to convince you of something, and they can much more easily convince you of something else, and then you go, oh, well then that other premise must have been valid because you are not being sharp enough to see that the thing they convinced you of is not the thing that they're claiming is valid. So we've now looked at 10 fallacies in arguments, 4 in the first video and 6 more in this video. In this video, the limited choice, the appeal to emotion, the personal attack, the the straw man, circular reasoning, and the red herring. And these fallacies are often used to get us to believe in a certain conclusion, to definitively believe in a certain conclusion, and we want to be sharp enough to detect it when these fallacies come up in advertising for a product or persuading us about the rightness of a political candidate's views or to vote for a political candidate or something similar to that. So in this section we're looking at arguments making definitive claims, and we're showing that those definitive claims being made are either not valid at all or more often not supported for the reasons given. That doesn't mean that the claims being made are false. It just means that the arguments are weak, are not logical arguments supporting the conclusion. So this concludes the 2 videos, or the set of videos on this section, Living in the Media Age. As we look at logical arguments in a more in-depth fashion, we're going to look at inductive arguments and sets of premises that will be used to make a conclusion, or a conclusion will be made from a set of premises. That set of premises will be analyzed for whether it will probably or more likely lead to the conclusion. So that's a different type of argument that we're looking at in subsequent sections. Here we're looking at arguments that have definitive conclusions, and we've been able to say that if they have this fallacy, those definitive conclusions are wrong. We're going to look at more subtle versions of arguments later, where we're going to decide whether it's likely that the conclusion being made is true based on the supporting premises. So this ends this video on section 1A, or the set of videos on section 1A.